welcome to my office instead of the church. It's great that we can be here together and think about the Bible together today, even though we can't meet physically. We're going to look at Psalm 46. So please open up your Bibles and have a look at it with me, because that's what we're going to be seeing today. And what I'm going to say this morning is important, because the truth is we all fear something, maybe now more than ever. Isolation, worldwide death, everything seems uncertain, everything is up in the air. Today it's easy to feel fear because we've never experienced something of this magnitude in our lifetime. COVID-19 is easy to worry about. It's easy to wonder how it'll all work out. Maybe you don't fear the possibility of death, but you think about how the finances will go, how the future will turn out. It feels like the world is out of our control. None of us know what the next few months will look like. We don't know how each of us is going to be personally impacted by this virus. There's fear and uncertainty. It consumes our days in every conversation, in our time, and the onslaught of the media. And for some people, it consumes their nights with little sleep from worry and fear. My question for you is, how do you cope in the face of fear? The men who wrote Psalm 46 understood sleeplessness. They understood fear, and so they wrote this psalm, my two little girls, with prompts and actions. We memorized this psalm together so that they would know how to face their fear. And after this sermon, my prayer for you is that in the face of fear, one thing will be ringing in your ears that reminds you there's nothing to fear. And that is, God is with us. Don't fear disaster. There's God's city of peace, and don't fear the future. So don't fear disaster. The author thinks of the most tragic natural disaster that's possible. A little into verse 2 and verse 3. Read it with me. Though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. This isn't describing simply a natural disaster. This is describing the disaster. A disaster that makes even what we face today in COVID-19 look trivial. Across the world, there have been thousands of deaths. It's rocked our countries, it's rocked societies, it's rocked individuals across the globe. But the psalmist here, the guy who writes this, considers the very reversal of creation. He's saying, imagine if the world caved in on itself. And in the face of even this, what does the psalmist say? He says, they will not fear. Why? Look at verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. God's more powerful than the destruction of the earth. He's a refuge in any disaster that we may face, including right now. He's a very present help. So it isn't like when I called the government hotline on Wednesday to get some help. I needed some advice. But I rang up and they said, we can't take your call right now because there's an influx of need. See, God's not like that. He's not distant. He's far better than just a phone call away. He's an ever-present help. That's what it says. And I think we know this. If we've heard anything about Christianity or grown up knowing what Christians believe, we know God is our help. Songs have been written, people have thought about it before, and pastors have preached it before from the front of church 1,000,000 times. I'm not sure how many times in front of a camera. But everyone knows this. But knowing verse 1 isn't enough. We claim to know this, but it's verse 2 that gets us. It says, therefore we will not fear. See, it's one thing to say God's my help. It's one thing to know in my head that God's my help. It's quite another thing to genuinely say and feel, therefore I will not fear. God's with us. We don't need to fear disaster striking. You know, when we tune into the TV, listening to the most recent government reports and instructions on how to minimize this disaster, we attempt to control as much as we can, but just find we can't. We can't get everything we want from the supermarket. We can't go out wherever we would like with whoever we want. On top of that, there's the imagination that plays in our minds, the worry of what might yet be. Can we say together at this time, like the psalmist declares, because he knows God is with him, I will not fear? It doesn't matter what it is that we may fear or that we may face. We do not need to fear because God's with us. He's our refuge and strength. He's our very present help in trouble. Right now, in all of this. I remember an interview with Barack Obama a few years ago. And he said, everything we face is solvable. That's my best Barack impression. It's not very good. Everything we face is solvable. The sad thing is that it doesn't stack up. Tsunamis have wiped out millions. Hurricanes destroy homes. Fire wipes out property and lives. And a virus spreads across the world, bringing death wherever it goes. Everything we face is not solvable. You know, despite the world's best efforts in this modern day, we couldn't stop the virus spreading across the globe. We need more than ourselves. We need God who is strong when we're not powerful enough. We need God who is our ever-present help when we face trouble. We need more than our capacity for solutions. Instead, we need to be able to say, no matter what, I will not fear, because God's with us. Because God's with me. So we don't need to fear disaster because God's with us. And because there's a city where God dwells. That has no more turmoil or disaster. That is full of peace and security. People aren't isolating. There's no possibility of a virus and sickness and danger and death in this city. There's joy and freedom. And that's verse 4. In comparison to the raging seas we see earlier, in verse 4 it says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. The holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. God's there. So there's nothing to fear. There's no turmoil or angst or danger. Why? God's there. There is a city that we can be a part of as a Christian that is unshakable, immovable, indestructible. There's security and safety that every Christian will one day be a part of. Even in the turmoil of this life, even in the face of fear, here is security that is offered to all those who put their trust in Jesus. No matter what we face, whether it's sickness, disaster, people in power against us, God is the greatest power and He's with us. That's verse 6 to 7. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter, He utters His voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. The nations and the kingdoms, the greatest powers can come up against God and His city and His people, and they can do nothing. America, China, Russia, with all their military might, their nuclear arms, their fighter jets and advanced weapon systems, when God utters His voice, it all melts. This is the God. This is the God described here, who's with us. He's our fortress. There's no need to fear. There's no need to fear power that is out of our control. Because God is in control and He promises a city of safety to come. one man who lived 500 years ago named Martin Luther. He wrote his most famous song on this psalm called "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." Before he wrote this song, he faced the bubonic plague, and he faced it while his wife was pregnant. Most died from it, and it was a very painful way to go. It was a terrifying plague. So where did Luther draw his strength from? He drew it from this psalm. He said, "On earth is not his equal. He is by our side. God's with us. Therefore we will not fear disaster, people in power, because God's with us. He has the future in his hands." He has the future in his hands. And we don't need to fear the future. God will judge everything and everyone that has set themselves up against him and his people. Don't fear the future. God's in charge. Look at verses 8 to 9. It says, "Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire." See, there's a future to come in which God will bring judgment and justice on the earth. We will marvel at his power over everything. He's complete and utter control. Everything that challenges God and his power and authority will be destroyed, stopped. God says to everything that sets itself up against him and his people, in verse 10, he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." God addresses the nations and powers and everything that we can fear in this life, and he says, "Stop. Be still." Now, are you sick of fear? Are you sick of dealing with this uncertainty right now? Are you sick of facing all the ramifications of life right now in the midst of the coronavirus? Because a future is coming where everything that ruins our world will be dealt with. There's no need to fear the future. Now let's be clear, the Bible isn't saying terrible things won't happen. We only need to turn on the news and stick our head out the window. It's saying when life does throw its hardest at you, there's still no need to fear, because this God described here is with us. He's in control of the last day. No one can rise up against him and shake their fists, their weapons. God just speaks. That's all he does, and everything withers. Everything becomes still. Even the staunchest opponent, they'll shake in their boots. And God will be exalted. Because God has got the future, because of that last day, this means there's no need to fear the future. Unless, and it's the obvious here, unless you're against God. Unless you're not actually with God and he's not with you. Because this actually means judgment is coming for you. And this judgment is far worse than what we're dealing with even right now. This is something you should truly fear. There's no hope against this might and power. If God is not with you and you're not with him, you're against God, and God will come against you. And if you hear what I'm saying, this is the most vital, most important, most urgent need in your life right now. It's more urgent than action to take with COVID-19. And you can't distract yourself with Netflix binge or your mobile phone or some exercise to clear your mind, because this is as real as you and me. There is a power so great that with simply his voice, everything can melt. And if he's not with you, he's against you. And you do not want this all-controlling, all-powerful God against you. So the question we need to ask is, how can we be with God? How can God be with us? Well, this is why this psalm is called the Christmas psalm. God with us, Emmanuel, Jesus. Jesus came to be with us. Jesus is the way for God to be with us. and for you to be with God. So don't tune out or switch off or ignore this reality, because this is the most significant fact in your life and you need to face it. Trusting Jesus is the only way for God to be with us. And this is how we face a world that is out of our control. This is how we face fear. This is how we face COVID-19. God being with us. But I don't know about you. When I read this psalm, it still doesn't always seem to comfort us like it should. I think the reason for this is because there are a few roadblocks that prevent us from feeling the weight of this psalm. I'll mention two. The first roadblock is that instead of finding refuge in God, like this psalmist does, we find it in other things. So when my wife was a little kid, apparently she had a blanket called a fringy. It was called fringy. It was her security. She would hold on to that as a kid while sucking her thumb, and she would feel safe. The only problem is fringy could not keep her safe at all. It wasn't a secure refuge, but she fooled herself into thinking it was. Too often as adults, we look to other refuges instead of God, thinking they'll keep us safe. We look to family who care for us over this time. We look to doctors who will keep us healthy even in this threat. We look to our lifestyle choices and isolation to keep us safe. We look to the government to keep the virus from spreading in Australia. We look to hand sanitizer to keep us safe. We look to our ability to control what's around us. The problem is all these things are as secure as my wife's fringy. They aren't powerful enough to be our refuge. We need to let go of our fringy blankets, everything we look for security in, and cling to God alone as our refuge, to hold on to Him, so that when we read this psalm and remember that it says God's with us, that is our security, our comfort, our assurance. Nothing can cause us to fear when our refuge is found in God alone. Because He's more powerful than any virus. He's more powerful than our bank account statements. He's more powerful than death itself. There's a future city waiting for us where we will be safe forever, safe from pain, safe from sadness, safe from sickness, safe from death. So if God is for us, who can be against us? Now, the second roadblock is that our experience of life teaches us to fear. And it makes sense because either in our lives or the lives of those around us, things go wrong. Just look at the world today. Stock markets fall, people lose their jobs. Or we can't even hold a proper funeral or wedding right now. Death may be around the corner, if not for ourselves, but for people we love. And it's hard to not fear. The truth is, fear is easy and trusting God is hard when we see our worst fears come true. Fear is hard to shake off in the midst of it all. Our understanding, two things comfort us. Our understanding of the future and our understanding of God is what is truly reassuring. Because in the future, one day, it will all be made right. We will enter the city of God and He will bring justice upon the earth. Our future is certain for those who trust in Jesus. That's how a woman named Bev faced one of her worst fears coming true. I was reading about her recently. Her beautiful little girl, Christy, was born, but something was wrong. Her daughter was born with a muscle condition that changed their life. They had to protect her because even the smallest sickness was deadly to this little girl. Their money and time went to hospital stays instead of family vacations. And when Christy was just 3 years old, she caught an illness. Her body couldn't fight it. And after 5 weeks in a coma, Christy, this little girl, passed away. So Bev wrote a letter to Christy after she had died, and she said to her little daughter, she said, "Dear Christy, You said every day that someday I'll walk, someday I'll dance, someday I'll fly with Peter Pan. That someday is here, and we are so happy for you. See, Christy's in safety now, in security, in a calm, gentle stream, in a city where God is. And if you trust in Jesus, God's got your future. There's no need to fear. Our good God is with us. And God also orchestrates our lives here. God's not only got our future, but God also orchestrates our lives here. Bev wrote later on about her little girl's death. And she said, my daughter's illness was the end of a certain kind of world that I had dreamed of. But there's another world, one that I would have never chosen, but that has proven to be more fulfilling, meaningful, and in some ways more wonderful than I would have ever imagined. The truth is, right now, everything could easily change for us in a moment. But it doesn't mean that you're alone or abandoned. Even if you're isolated in your home, or whatever new situation you find yourself in, you can be confident that God created it for you. He created it for your good and His glory, and He will be with you if you're with Him through Jesus. The reason we don't believe this in the end is because our picture of God is too small. Our fear of illness, disability, dementia, death is too big for a God who we believe is too small. Our love of comfort and health and freedom is too big for a God who we believe is too small. But the sooner we realize God is big and everything else is small, the sooner we find comfort in this psalm. I'm one of those annoying guys who say, if you want to know what a book is about and there's a movie based on it, watch the movie. And, people hate it. When I say that, they complain to me how the movie misses all the good bits and it misses all the plot twists, adds unnecessary things. And, maybe that's fair enough. I know The Lord of the Rings, it has a lot more in the books compared to the movie, naturally. One scene is where Sam, Frodo, Pippin and Merry are fleeing for their life. Dangers surround them, fear on every side. And they decide to go through the old forest, where Pippin and Merry inevitably are being swallowed alive by a tree. And this mysterious character comes skipping and dancing along the path. Tom Bombadil, master of water, wood and hill. And with a song, he frees those little hobbits and leads them back to his house. Tom's wife says to them as they enter, she says, "Come, dear folk, fear nothing, for tonight you're under the roof of Tom Bombadil." The hobbits enter and rest and sleep and are renewed, fearing nothing. Now the question has to be asked, isn't it a bit naive to just let go of all fear? Should we really, like the hobbits in old Bombadil's house, laugh and sing the night away while just beyond the door the wargs prowl and the coronavirus spreads? Who but a fool or a silly child can take those words, "God is with us, so there's no need to fear," seriously? See, in Tolkien's novel, these hobbits are really seen as little toddlers compared to the knights of Rohan or the elves and wizards and warriors. Hobbits are trusting and dependent. And under Tom's roof, they readily put fear aside, for no matter how dark or fearful or dangerous, it could never eclipse what they felt under the roof of Bombadil. And as Christians, is it naive to fear nothing, to trust God so completely with everything? Well, imagine being secure under the roof of the greatest being you know. Imagine having complete trust in the one who is in complete control. Tom Bombadil is a fictional character who didn't even make the cut in the movies. But God is so much more powerful and real and trustworthy. Surely we can have more security and trust than those little hobbits and say, despite it all, despite COVID-19, God is with us. Therefore, we will not fear. Let's pray. All-powerful God, we thank you that you are big and everything else is small. Help us, God, in our fear, in our uncertainty, in the midst of everything going on in life right now. Help us to trust you, to look to you as our refuge and strength, to run to you through Jesus. And may we be able to say, therefore, I will not fear. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now, if you're listening to this and not part of the Bannockburn Presbyterian Church, then we'd love for you to join us after this for some prayer. We're all getting together on Zoom and we're going to pray for each other. So just type Zoom into Google and use this member ID, and you can join us for prayer now if you'd like, about 10:50 a.m. on the 29th of March 2020.